All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. I'm Terry Kimball, President and CEO here at the Chandler Chamber, and we're so pleased to continue to bring you this series. And this is done in part with our Chandler Industrial Development Authority, who believes in small business and making sure that we are getting information out to you. Today I have joining us Jennings Imel with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Jennings, thank you so much for joining us. You know I'm a huge fan, and I love when you give us updates because it always gives me about 8 more to-dos. So. And we also have Paula with the SBDC, and she is here every week helping you navigate throughout these times and what is our next step going forward. And we're going to hear an update from Paula in a little bit. So I just want to introduce Jennings. Jennings is the Executive Director for the Western Regional in the Congressional and Public Affairs Division at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. His office is responsible for legislative and political grassroots activities in Arizona, California, Hawaii, Nevada, and Utah, and with the support of the Chamber's national public policy goals. Before joining the Chamber in 2013, Jennings actually worked in Washington, D.C. and with the U.S. Association of Former Members of Congress and at the public affairs firm of Mercury, Clark, and Weinstock. Earlier, he worked in the California State Assembly. Jennings also managed and worked on several successful congressional and state legislative campaigns, mostly in Southern California. But Jennings received a master's degree in international affairs from the George Washington University and a bachelor's degree in political science and German from the University of California, Riverside. So Jennings, I wish you could hear the applause, but thank you again for joining us. You're always a wealth of information. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Thanks for that introduction. Thanks for having me, as always. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and chat about what's going on in DC. A lot of really important stuff, a lot of very relevant information, I'm sure, for the folks that are on this call. And I just want to say, as always, thank you for your partnership with the Chandler Chamber. You all do an excellent job, obviously, in so many different areas, but particularly on advocacy as well. Really being the voice of business to really elected officials at every level, including at the federal level, which we certainly appreciate. And so we really value the partnership that we have with you all. And just I want to commend you too for the work that you're doing during these very difficult circumstances and kind of being the go-to resource for business. And chambers, including the Chandler Chamber, are really being asked to do a lot more now than ever with very limited resources. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well in my presentation about kind of what we're doing at the federal level to try to ensure that chambers of commerce also get much needed federal assistance to get through this pandemic. But thank you for all that you're doing. I'll try to share my screen right now. Hopefully it works seamlessly. Okay, I think we're good. Looks like it's working. You never know with these things sometimes. So I'll try to go into mode here. There you go. So I'll focus mostly on kind of the next big package. I think that's really what everybody's concerned about. And certainly that's the talk right now in DC this week. And it's going to be the talk for the next couple of weeks. The Paycheck Protection Program, I know everybody on this call is very familiar with. Many of you have probably already applied for a loan through that program, or some of you are still considering it. So I won't spend too much time. And I know that we also have Paula from SBDC on the call that's going to be able to talk a little bit about what's going on with PPP and EIDL. But just kind of a quick overview on some of the changes, of course, that were made from the PPP Flexibility Act that passed over a month ago, that did extend, the forgiveness terms from 8 weeks to 24 weeks to give businesses a little bit more flexibility. Really, a lot of the provisions that were in here were designed to give borrowers more flexibility in how they use the PPP money and to be able to spread it out, use it for more than just payroll, use it for some of those other costs, such as utilities, rent, things like that. So it did revise that 75-25 requirement on spending on payroll down to 60-40. It extended the covered period to December 31st. It also allowed for businesses, of course, to reinstate their FTE count or to reinstate wages by the end of the year instead of by June 30th of 2020. So all that kind of stuff I think was really helpful. It extended the loan terms from 2 years to 5 years, still at that 1% interest rate. Unfortunately, it did not include 501c6s and other nonprofits. 501c6s, of course, being trade associations and chambers of commerce. They were not included, and we're going to continue to fight to get them included in this next larger phase 4 package. The big deadline, of course, that's out there for PPP is August 8th. So Congress did act on that a few weeks ago, extending the deadline from June 30th to August 8th. So if you haven't yet taken out a PPP loan and your business is still hurting, obviously, with the pandemic ongoing and the shutdowns ongoing or restarting once again, please consider doing that. There's still about $130 billion left in this program. So the money is definitely there. And I'd encourage anybody that needs it to go ahead and reach out to a lender and try to get a PPP loan. And like I said, that deadline is August 8th. And that August 8th deadline, of course, is going to be pushing Congress to act. That's one of the action forcing deadlines that's out there. That one, as well as July 31st for the unemployment insurance. So those are some of the changes. Like I said, don't need to spend a whole lot of time here. And I know that Paula is going to talk a little bit about this later on as well. I'd also advise for folks that are interested in kind of navigating this process or unsure how to navigate this process to go to our website. We have a lot of resources at uschamber.com/PPP forgiveness that really breaks down the forgiveness process, how to go about applying, kind of in plain English language. Of course, the SBA, they did release a much shorter version of the forgiveness application, as well as an easy form. So there's a 3-page easy form. There's a 5-page form that you'd fill out to apply for forgiveness. That's a market improvement over the original 11-page form that they had introduced initially. So that's helpful, but we have a lot of stuff that you can find at uschamber.com that kind of helps guide helps you kind of navigate the forgiveness process, as well as just PPP, EIDL, the Main Street Lending Program as well, and other resources that the federal government is offering during this pandemic. So please feel free to check that out as well. And by the way, I should mention, you don't have to kind of take a screenshot or take a picture or anything of this. I did send this slide deck to our friends at the Chandler Chamber, so this will be shared with all of you. The next phase 4 bill, of course, that's kind of all the talk right now. The Senate has been working pretty hard over the last couple of days to find a consensus, particularly among Senate Republicans, to find broad consensus within their caucus on what the next package is going to look like. Of course, we already saw about 2 months ago what the House's priorities were on this, and House Democrats. They did pass the HEROES Act, which was a $3.5 trillion package that passed, like I said, about 2 months ago, largely on a partisan basis. I think there were 2 Republicans in the House that voted in support. That bill was essentially dead on arrival in the Senate, but it did kind of lay down the marker for what the House Democrats' priorities were going to be in the next bill. We saw that there was almost $1 trillion in funding for state and local governments. There was a second round of stimulus checks to individuals and families. It extended the pandemic unemployment insurance, that extra $600 per week through January of 2021. It did a couple of good things, including it expanded eligibility for the PPP program to all nonprofits, including 501c6s. So that's a great sign. That we have pretty broad support, particularly among Democrats, but I think also among Republicans in the House. So that was good to see. Really, kind of the red line issue that House Democrats identified early on was state and local funding. So that's why you saw such a significant portion of that bill dedicated to state and local funding, recognizing that state and local coffers had been hit quite a bit through a reduction in tax revenue. And so that's been a really kind of a key issue for Democrats moving forward. And this bill, like I said, passed 2 months ago. It's likely that the asking, the number that is going to be requested by House Democrats could be even higher than $3.5 trillion, given the fact that schools, K through 12 schools, child care providers are going to potentially need more assistance. State and local governments could potentially need more assistance. So we're hearing that the number could actually be increased from that $3.5 trillion. Of course, very different discussion happening on the Senate side. The Senate decided not to move on the HEROES Act, largely because, well, they didn't agree with a lot of the provisions that were in it, but then also because of the price tag. As you all remember, the CARES Act was a huge bill that was, I think, almost $2.5 trillion. There were kind of growing deficit concerns among Republicans, particularly given the fact that it was estimated that 2020 we'd be seeing right around a $3.5 trillion deficit just for this fiscal year alone. So that was disconcerting for a lot of Republicans. And quite frankly, the sense was that they wanted to kind of see how the CARES Act played out first. They wanted to see how the PPP, how the Paycheck Protection Program worked, how Main Street Lending Program worked, and some of these other kind of credit facilities that were established, and kind of see what worked, what didn't work. So that was very much the approach on the Senate side, which is why they waited until, well, now, to really kind of get to work on coming up with this Phase 4 bill. Of course, on the spending side, a lot more concerns with the deficit. So what we've heard is that they want to limit this to about $1 trillion package. So there's a pretty significant gap there between their dollar amount and what House Democrats are looking at. So there's going to be kind of a lot of work that needs to be done over these next couple of weeks. Thankfully, though, we're able to see kind of a draft of some things that were circulated late last night. I think that we're going to start to see more details later today on some of the specific provisions that are going to be in this Phase 4 package from the Senate. And then next week, we can hopefully launch into full-scale negotiations between Republicans and Democrats. Of course, Democrats are kind of waiting on the sidelines to see what Republicans exactly are going to come out with before they start negotiations, which makes sense. But yeah, obviously on the dollar figure, they're very far apart, both sides. And then on a number of provisions as well, Democrats and Republicans are very much on different pages. And so this is going to be quite a Herculean effort or task to be able to come up with a huge package like this that Republicans and Democrats can broadly agree on, where you can find some bipartisan support and buy-in, particularly to do so before July 31st, which is, like I said, that's when that extra $600 per week, that's when that expires. That's next week. I'm not very confident that the House and Senate will be able to work through their differences before then. You do have the August 8th deadline for PPP, of course, so that's going to have to be addressed. That might be a more important deadline that's out there. But either way, I mean, it's very possible that we could see some of the August recess kind of delayed. Congress could have to stick around for longer than 2 weeks. They're expecting to be there just 2 more weeks, and then go back to their districts and states for August, but that could be extended into mid-August or beyond. We'll see, and there's a lot that kind of remains to be determined. But what we did see last night from just kind of some of the draft language that was circulating was the fact that we're definitely going to have liability protections. So that's been a key priority for the Senate, and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell identified that early on in the process. That was kind of the red line issue for the Senate. They needed to have liability protections included. And the 3 buckets of liability protections that are going to be included will be exposure liability, product liability, and healthcare liability. So they're specifically going to be pertaining to those 3 things. And this is really kind of designed to help businesses reopen and not have to worry about lawsuits related to COVID-19, whether that's from employees or customers. And really to provide those businesses with the legal safe harbor, so long as they're following CDC guidance, OSHA guidance, kind of the federal guidance, and even state guidance that's available, and doing the right thing, they won't have to be subject to those kind of lawsuits. However, it's not kind of blanket immunity that they're providing. If a business is proven to be grossly negligent or not following the guidance that's available, then they, of course, could be vulnerable and subject to these lawsuits. And these lawsuits, by the way, will progress through federal courts and not through state courts. There's very much a federal preemption issue involved here. So that's also going to be important to note as well. So this is not blanket liability or blanket liability protections or blanket immunity. This is something that if businesses are not following the guidance that's available, they obviously they need to be held to account, and it's going to be temporary as well. So this is not kind of a long-term change, legal reform change here. This is going to be probably right around 5 years or so, capped out. So That's been a really big provision that Senate Republicans have been talking about, and that's going to be included in this bill. There's $105 billion for K through 12 and childcare. We're hearing that Democrats want to see a lot more than that. The number that I've seen thrown out there is about $400 billion. So Republicans and Democrats will have to work together on that. There is going to be a second round of stimulus checks. That's what it looks like. There was talk that it might look a little different from that first round, and that the income requirements might be a little bit more stringent, that they might try to take it down from $75,000 per individual to somewhere around $40,000. I think I heard from Secretary Mnuchin that that's maybe not going to be the case. He's kind of indicated that it's going to be right around the same as last time. Of course, we'll see what happens there, but I think we're going to see a second round of stimulus checks, second round of PPP loans. As I mentioned at the beginning, with all of that money still available in the program, and with businesses continuing to suffer and unemployment obviously continuing to be very high, and lockdowns continuing, there's going to be a need for a second round of PPP loans. So I think that that's going to happen. However, we're hearing that the restrictions are going to be a little different than the first round of PPP that was made available through the CARES Act. So instead of having that 500 employee count maximum, that could be brought down to somewhere around 300 employees. We're also hearing that there might be a requirement that the business experienced more than 50% reduction in revenue compared to maybe a quarter in the previous year, a comparable quarter in the previous year. So that might be included as well as kind of a new requirement that's put on that second round of PPP. And we're also hearing that it will be expanded potentially beyond payroll. So you won't be forced to spend 60% on payroll and then 40% on rent and interest and utilities, but that it will cover other fixed costs as well. So those are the kind of things that are floating out there with the second round of PPP. And obviously we're going to work to make sure that C6s and nonprofits are included as well. The UI extension, it looks like Senate Republicans have come to somewhat of an agreement on that to at least attempt to replace 70% of the wages of the worker when doing the UI extension. Of course, that's going to be very difficult to do. That requires some technical capabilities that state unemployment insurance agencies don't necessarily have. Some have them, some might be able to do it easier than others. So there's been talk of at least 70% being the goal, but in the meantime, until state agencies can figure out the system on how to do that, there would be kind of a minimum amount, whether it's $200 or $300 per week, something like that, that unemployed folks will be able to draw from until states can figure out how to cap it at 70% of previous wages. So that's the goal that's been stated by Senate Republicans. There's no new money for state and local governments. However, they're going to try to add flexibility to the initial $150 billion that was made available through the CARES Act, so that state and local governments can use that for purposes beyond COVID-19. So that's going to be a point of contention for sure. Democrats, like I said, that's their kind of red line issue. They need to see more money for state and local government. And then there's about $90 billion for hospitals, vaccine development, National Institutes of Health, and additional testing as well. So more resources there. I think that we're going to find some bipartisan agreement on that issue. FSA carryover is kind of an interesting thing too, allowing folks to carry over their flexible spending account, the money that they have in there, to 2021 if they don't use the full $5,000 in 2020. So I think that would have some bipartisan appeal as well. So those are some of the issues that we've seen so far. There's going to be a lot more to come over the next couple of days and weeks. This is all very early on in the process. This is kind of the opening bid from Senate Republicans, and I think that there's just going to be a lot of negotiating that's going to have to take place over the next couple of days and weeks. So that's the current state of affairs right now. I'll mention for us at the U.S. Chamber, we've identified our priorities for Phase 4. We have 5 top priorities, and these are those priorities. We have liability protections is huge for us. We've been talking about it for a long time now. Exposure liability, product liability, healthcare liability, that really aligns neatly with what we've seen come out of the Senate. As I kind of touched on, we want this to be targeted, timely, and temporary. This is not blanket immunity. This is not long-term, wholesale changes to legal reform or liability issues. This is going to be targeted specifically to the COVID-19 pandemic. We want to see ongoing support for small and mid-sized businesses. So that means absolutely continuing the PPP beyond August 8th, including 501c6s and nonprofits. We want to expand the employee retention tax credit. Right now, it's currently capped at essentially $5,000 per employee. We want to be able to expand that and allow more businesses to take advantage of that tax credit. And we also want to see how we can immediately monetize other business tax credits. So a lot of businesses already have tax credits that they have on the books, but aren't able to necessarily access now. And in order to improve liquidity, we want to make sure that they can access those tax credits as soon as possible. Support for childcare and K through 12, of course, huge priority. We need to get schools back up and running, and schools are going to need to have, they're going to have huge costs associated with that, doing temperature checks and installation of PPE, social distancing. That's going to cost a lot of money, and the federal government, we think, needs to step up and be able to help out, because we're going to need childcare providers and schools to be operating and to have, obviously, students in their desks and there if we want their parents to be back into the workforce. So that's going to have to be huge, and we're happy to see that both Republicans and Democrats are kind of prioritizing that issue. Unemployment and job training for sure. Once again, we align, I think, pretty neatly with Senate Republicans on this. We want to see the extension of the pandemic unemployment insurance to replace right about 80 to 90% of prior covered wages. So it's pretty similar to what we've seen from the Senate, up to a maximum of $400 per week. And we want it to be a minimum of $200 per week for those states that aren't able to kind of work out the system on how to get that 80, 90% calculation. So that's what we want to see for the extension of unemployment insurance. We also want to make sure that the federal government is providing resources for job training and retraining programs, understanding that there are still available positions. Some industries are still doing relatively well, but then other industries are really not just going to be hit for the next couple of months, but this could lead to a very different kind of overall labor market that we're going to see for the next few years. I mean, leisure and hospitality, retail for sure. I think that it's going to take a long time, like I said, perhaps years for some of these jobs to really come back, if they come back at all. So we really need to start thinking about how we invest in job training programs that get workers from those industries that have suffered and are going to continue to suffer and into industries where there's still a demand for workers. So I think that that's going to be important. And then state and local funding as well, targeted payments to state and local governments. And we want to see this kind of capped at essentially 90%, or to fill 90% of projected quarterly revenues. So that means that we're not looking at these kind of block grants to states necessarily, where we have some states that kind of get money that maybe shouldn't be getting money. And I know that that's been an issue, particularly for Republicans. They don't want to reward states that have had kind of engaged in bad fiscal policy or behavior previously. So really what we want to do is we want to have that determined by kind of what the quarterly projected revenues were of that state, or at least base it off of previous years. So we can have an idea of what the state was expecting to receive in revenue, and the federal government can step up and make sure that about 90% of the projected revenues are met. So I think that that makes the most sense going forward for state and local funding, and hopefully we'll see Republicans and Democrats come together on that. So those are our 5 big priorities. And what I could do as well in the chat is I could link our document. We sent a letter to Congress last week. It was a pretty extensive or pretty exhaustive list of things that we want to see. So I'm happy to include that in the chat as well. So all of you can have a look at what our priorities are. Beyond that, for the rest of 2020, I don't need to go into all of this, but there are going to be a number of things, of course, that Congress is going to have on its plate outside of just the pandemic and COVID-19. September, I think that you're going to start to see pandemic insurance, that issue come up a little bit. There's a possibility that we could see some movement on DACA, although I'm not sure how likely that is in an election year. But there are, multi-employer pension issue. That's big. That's even coming up in the phase 4 discussions. September 30th, of course, is when the fiscal year ends. So you're going to have a lot of programs that need to be reauthorized by then, especially surface transportation. That's going to be big. And then November, December, you might see a few more items. But so those are some of the things that are out there on the docket for Congress right now. I think that of course, all the attention is going to be paid on this next Phase 4 bill, and this is going to be probably one of the few kind of big legislative trains leaving the station this year. So that's kind of the rundown of everything that's happening, of where discussions are. I will say that Senators Sinema and McSally have been great supporters of the business community, obviously, on a number of issues and on a lot of these issues. So please, continue to reach out to them on, the importance of, the PPP program, on, 501c6s and nonprofits. They've been really receptive to a lot of these things. And I know that they've talked a lot about, tax credits being made available for PPE and things like that. So they've been really good. And same thing for Congressman Stanton, Congressman Biggs as well. They've been strong supporters on a number of issues, and continued outreach to them is going to be very important on a lot of these issues. So with that, I'll leave it there. I know it was a lot of information that I covered. I'll stop my share, and then I'm happy to take any questions.
Jennings, great presentation, lots of information. Let's go to some of the questions. Is there still consideration for full forgiveness for the PPP loans under $150,000?
Yep, there is. I am not sure if that'll be included. I think that was gaining some momentum though. And I know Senator Sinema has talked a lot about that. We even sent a letter of support on that issue a couple of weeks ago to Congress. And we're hopeful that that'll be included.
So this next question, are you familiar with California rules regarding COVID-19 and workers' comp?
Yep. Yeah, so in California, they have the presumption standard. So if you get COVID-19, then it's presumed that it happened in the workplace. So that's a big problem for workers' comp. And of course, it's going to increase ultimately over time, increase the costs of workers' comp for employers, given that presumption issue. And that makes it difficult too when we're talking about liability. And that's part of the reason too why we need liability to be addressed at the federal level as well. Because if that standard's already been set, that there's presumption that if you have COVID-19 and you're an employee, an essential employee, presumption that you got it from your employer, then that already kind of sets the standard for potential litigation down the road, right? So that's not a good thing, and that's part of the reason too why we need to see the federal government act on this.
We love when California does stuff like that, Jennings, and I know that you spend a lot of time in California, but California is an excellent economic development tool for Arizona. So,
trade missions, right?
If you didn't here's another question. If you didn't get the first round stimulus checked, what can you do to receive that?
Didn't get the first round, I would go, to the IRS, to their website, or even, I think, congressional offices are pretty good at that. So if you reach out to your member of Congress and let them know, you'll be able to kind of have that direct line to IRS to help you out.
And on that IRS website, there is, it's a real quick thing that you put in and you get, once you register, it's immediately. Question, will businesses who receive PPP be able to apply for additional PPP funds in the second round? That's
the goal. And I think that's what we'd like to see that. And I think that's the idea that's out there, is that, even businesses that received help the first round, they're going to need it for a second round. So they should try to make that money available.
Okay. The next question, will the federal action trump California's rules?
So on
the workers' comp. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the workers' comp thing, not so much. I mean, that's a state issue. I mean, they can do that if that's what they want to do. And that's through executive order. Governor Newsom did that a couple of months ago. But at least the liability issue, I think that should help anyway. Help some of those businesses in California that would be, otherwise sued, right, by an employee or a customer, but particularly an employee. I think that should help. Just, the fact that we're going to be going through the federal court system as well, that we're going to be setting up kind of a new standard that, you have to show gross negligence, things like that, in order to be potentially liable. I think that that's going to help. But unfortunately, on the workers' comp issue directly, there's not a whole lot that the federal government can do, I think, on that.
Great. Another question, is there a new round of PPP loans or similar, and how soon will it be anticipated to get approved?
Well, yeah, they want to, there's still $130 billion left. I don't know if they're going to add money to that. They want to make it available for a second round. And like I said, they're going to have new requirements, more stringent requirements, potentially, like bringing down the FTEs from 500 to 300. There might be a requirement that the business show that they've seen a 50% reduction in revenue. So there might be kind of additional requirements like that. But I think that the will is there to certainly reauthorize this program. And hopefully they'll be able to do it before August 8th, because that's obviously when it expires. That's kind of, I think, the biggest deadline that's out there that's going to be pushing Congress to act. But I mean, it's possible we could see a lapse, but hopefully not.
Well, Jennings, you always have so much information and leave us with more questions too. So I appreciate all the hard work that the U.S. Chamber is doing on this, as well as we have been on the Chandler Chamber Business Resource page. We have direct links to the U.S. Chamber in all of their resources, because I will say you have really stepped it up, and we utilize all of those resources and how to get those out to our members. So thank you on that. And I know that there's another question about the EIDL loans and anything new on the EIDL loans, which is a perfect lead into Paula. Paula is with our local SBDC, and Paula gives us all these great updates. She is with us every week. So tell us what's happening on PPP and EIDL.
All right, this is perfect. So Jennings, let me go ahead and share my deck here. So here we go. Do you see the PowerPoint deck? Oops. All right. So yes, this is perfect. So Jennings touched on some updates on the PPP program, so that's terrific. So I would just want to give you some updates and maybe some tips on EIDL and the PPP loans. So the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is still open. Now that EIDL Advance Grant that was up to $10,000 based on $1,000 per employee, that is no longer available, but the EIDL loan program is still open. So if you've not applied for this yet, I would encourage you to check into that. I've listed, the application is through the SBA. So you go to the sba.gov website and you'll find the application there. For those not familiar with this program, here's just a couple of basic points of information. Now this was up to $2 million, but what we are seeing for the clients that we're working with, it appears to be capped at $150,000 at this point in time. The interest rate is 3.75% for small businesses, 2.75% for nonprofits. The term is up to 30 years. There's a 1-year deferment on the first payment, and there are no prepayment penalty fees. And so the monies for this program are intended to, pay those fixed expenses that aren't going away, even though you've seen, a reduction in your revenues. Oftentimes we're getting questions about, use of those funds. You cannot use these funds to pay down other debt. You cannot use it for business expansion. It really is intended to cover those fixed, expenses that you have on a month-to-month basis. So I would encourage you to look into that program. We're not sure how long that portal will be open. We are also, as we're working with our clients on these EIDL loans, we're getting many questions about, I've applied, but I've not yet heard back about my loan. And so what we are encouraging our clients to do is to contact the customer service number that you were provided through that program. You should have gotten an application number and the customer service number. So call that number, talk to the person. If you're not getting any resolution from the first person, try again or try again. Sometimes, they've had a big influx, as we understand it, of new people on board. So sometimes that persistence of getting through until you get the right person can get you the answers you need. We are trying to help our clients, if they're just not getting resolution, to make some contacts to help them over that and help them navigate that. So just be persistent on that. And if you still need help, I would encourage you to check into SBDC counseling and see if we can help you over that hurdle. Jennings talked about the PPP, several of the loan updates coming around the corner here. As he said, it's open until August 8th, so you can still apply. I know that Terry, the Chandler Chamber, has some contacts with lenders that if you're not sure where to start that search. The SBDC also can help you identify lenders that are still offering the PPP program. It's been out there a while, so not all lenders are still offering that, but we can help you navigate that as well. And for additional information, you can go to the SBA.gov website. And those loans are through the lender. And as far as the forgiveness, yes, we'll see what happens with the forgiveness. The application is out on the U.S. Department of Treasury website. So when you get to the point where you've expended the funds of your PPP loan, what we're recommending first is to contact your lender, let them know that you've used those monies and you're ready for the forgiveness process. Now, what we're hearing from the SBA is there's still some work being done on the back end of lenders and the SBA working together to process those forgiveness applications. So I would just say take a breath, right? Even though you've used your monies, you don't have to get that application, to your lender right away. They're still working on some of the back end processing and figuring that out. But please reach out to your lender, let them know that you're ready for that process and stay in touch with that lender. You just want to make sure you get through that forgiveness process, whatever that might be. Changes are coming every day within the time frames stipulated by that program. And then just very quickly, we continue to help our clients. The Maricopa SBDC, we're part of the America's SBDC Arizona Network. And we help our clients in all areas of business development. And this is no-fee counseling. We are funded by the SBA at the federal level and Maricopa Community Colleges. So we work with clients on a long-term basis. It's just not a one-term or one-time meeting. With our clients, we try to establish those long-term relationships as they start to build and grow their business. And right now, we're really helping everyone through that, just navigating these disaster loan programs, and we'll continue to do that. And as things change with the PPP program, I'm sure our clients and hopefully some new clients will be coming to us, and we can help to provide some explanation about these programs and how they're changing, how you can apply, and any questions you have about those. We also help our clients, oftentimes we're hearing from folks that we've used our monies up and now we need to go look for additional funding. So we're working with them on identifying some additional funding sources, helping our clients get ready to approach the lender, really kind of assessing to see what is their lender readiness level and helping them prepare and put their best foot forward as they're approaching to look for additional funds. We're starting to help our clients with some resiliency assessments to help them, how do I figure out, to make it through the long term? And just keep in mind that we also offer expertise in export, international trade, and government contracting, as well as many other areas. So I've got our website listed there, maricopa-sbdc.com. It's very easy to, I'm missing a slide. Let's see, there we go. It's very easy to request counseling. Just go to our main webpage and fill out the request for counseling form, and that gets you into the system. You'll be contacted by a lead counselor, and we'll meet with you in an initial assessment just to talk about your business and figure out what your challenges are and see how the SBDC can help fill some of those gaps and help you not just through the times we are dealing with right now, but for the long-term growth of your business. So, and there is our contact information again.
Great. Thank you so much, Paula. Always updated information. And I would know we have a couple of questions, but before we go to the questions, as we continue through this, and I'll have Carly go ahead, I'd love to get you to do just one session on how do we work through this forgiveness application and what's involved. And so you're always a fountain of knowledge on that. And we've got a lot of people that were successful in that. Now we need to help them with that next hurdle. So
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Next question. For the PPP forgiveness, do we have to choose either 8 weeks or 24 weeks? Or can we apply after the example 10 weeks after we've used all of our money?
So yeah, you have, I mean, before I think it's that June 5th date, you can use that 8-week time frame, but you can also choose the 24-week time frame. So that change provided some great flexibility in whether it's the 8 or the 24 week. And that's kind of an individual basis as to what might make sense for your business.
Okay. Well, I have one that came in through my text message here. They couldn't be with us, but they have applied for the EIDL loan and received confirmation that they've received the EIDL loan. They have not submitted back the letter of paperwork request. Are they still eligible for the $10,000 forgiveness?
Now that I'm not sure. Typically it seems as though if you're getting that line, the loan, you may not get that grant. But we are seeing different things happening with some of our clients. So I would say reach out to the contact information for that loan program and ask them those questions. But if you've not submitted that paperwork and you do want that loan, I would not waste any time. I would reach out to them to let them know you're still interested in that loan, if that is.
And I think it's a maximum of 60 days that you have once you've been approved
Yes.
to receive that, correct?
Yes.
All right. When a business, oh, I'm sorry, first question. If you change from the 8 weeks to the 24 weeks, the forgiveness amount changes and it is lower.
That I am not sure. I mean, again, an individual basis, I'd be happy to talk to that particular person specifically about that situation. Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll go ahead and get that to you.
But here again, things are changing. So if some of these changes where, you know, perhaps they're looking at, you know, forgiveness for anything under $150,000, there's some unknowns, still some gray areas on this. So there again, maybe reach out to your lender, let you know you've used those monies, and maybe just take a brief pause, because even the lenders, like I said, in the SBA, they're working on the forgiveness and submitting those forgiveness applications. So there's a little bit of breathing room here before you'll need to submit that application.
Great.
Okay.
Another question, when a business is run by an owner only, could PPP help cover owner that has not collected any salary?
Yes. Yes, you would still be eligible for the PPP loan, so I would encourage you to apply for that program if you're in need for that.
Okay. I also want to make sure that everybody on the call is also aware of a program that we've worked with the City of Chandler on, and it is for PPE equipment. And so if you have masks that you are buying, mask, hand sanitizers, you know, screens, those kinds of things, so all you have to do is submit, there's a one-page application, you have to fill out a W-9 and submit your receipts to the City of Chandler, and within a week you will have a reimbursement check for up to $500 for according to what your receipts show. A maximum amount is $500. We are working with them on some additional monies through CARES funding that the city received, and we will keep you informed on that, but that other program is available. The other program I want to make sure everybody on the line is aware of, Maricopa County has a program, and it's all links on our business resource page on the Chamber's website, is businesses are eligible up to $10,000 for a givable grant from Maricopa County. So if you are based in Maricopa County, granted there is some criteria that you do have to meet, but it is an application. There's a little bit more paperwork that you have to submit, but because of the dollar amount, but that is also an additional opportunity that we want to make sure that you are aware of to help businesses. So, and it is also, it's all available on our website. Other questions for Paula or Jennings? Oh, great. Somebody just put that in there. Maricopa will not qualify if you've applied and received loans. That is correct, but there are businesses that have not applied for PPP or EIDL loans. And so those of you that are out there that have not received that or have been turned down on the EIDL loans, this is an opportunity for you to apply for those Maricopa funds. And again, more opportunities that we can provide. Not everybody's situation is the same. And so the more that we can get out to our businesses to keep your doors open is really important. Jennings, I have a couple of questions for you. On the PPP and the EIDL, and this question came up, and we've been hosting a series of business roundtables with our businesses. And the tribal communities are sovereign nations, but are they eligible if they're a business located on there for any of the EIDL or PPP?
I would think so. I haven't heard otherwise. I can look into that. I haven't been asked that question specifically, so that's a good question. But I would think that they're just as eligible as anybody else.
Yeah, because they're still paying, federal income tax. They're still paying their employees and so forth. I just wondered if you had known that. And then another question is, has anyone heard anything about landlord-tenant leases?
At the federal level, yeah, there was some assistance on the renter issue. I think in that HEROES Act, I think there was $150 billion in assistance there. But that was the House version that passed 2 months ago. The Senate version, though, it's a very different conversation. I don't think there's anything that deals with landlords, any evictions, things like that, or any assistance for renters. That could change, but that's kind of where the Senate is. The House is very much on a different page. So it's possible we could see something in there, but we'll see.
So, and then I do know that Governor Ducey did expand the eviction component for individuals and residences through October, and that is on the governor's site, the state of Arizona governor's site under the executive orders. That was in his press conference last week. I do know that we have had a number of conversations. We've had some roundtable discussions with several of our local landlords as well. And each of them are working, what we're hearing from them is that they are really working with individuals on an individual basis, and providing financials and so forth, showing those losses that they are incurring. We don't have anything concrete, but I do know that we've had some success with some of our landlords, especially those that are here locally based in Arizona. And depending on their circumstances. I've been told that the courts will side with the landlord in the contract lease sign. Contacted several lawyers, but state lease will stand. Does not make rent go away, and they are now charging rent with compounded interest of 27%. Can you refer lawyers? Actually, I do have a couple of lawyers and attorneys. We've had several of them on here. Last week we had one of our attorney partners that was giving you updates. So we'll make sure that we get you that information. 27% seems very high to me. So we can, and you're right, many of our landlords, what we're hearing is they're not forgiving. They may be abating it and adding it to the end of their lease, or adding it on within 18 months. We're hearing some of them are just reducing it, but then that balance that they've reduced it has also been, it's not a forgiveness type thing. And I think I've only heard of one landlord that is working with individuals and has forgave some of it, but not all of it. So, and that is, again, based upon an individual basis. So, Jennings and Paula, I just want to thank both of you again, because each and every one of us, none of us expected COVID. And it's interesting how all of us are really banding together in collaboration, because none of us are going to get through it on our own. And collaboration is absolutely the key right now. And now more than ever is the time for your voices to be heard. So if you want information on how to contact your elected officials at the local level, state or federal level, we have all of their contact information on our websites. We'd also be happy to give that to you. They want to hear from you. We put them in to hear our voices, and now it is time for them to respond. So now it's really, really important. And Jennings is nodding on that. Anything you want to add?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, it's more important now than ever. And all those, there were numerous changes to PPP, for example, that came about specifically because members of Congress heard from business what their concerns were with this program. So that's why they tried to make it more flexible and make it more friendly for the borrowers. And it was a direct result of that outreach from businesses, from chambers. So please continue to be engaged, because it does make a huge, huge difference. And especially when we're talking about this big phase 4 bill, be engaged, because you can really make a difference. So
I was sharing with Jennings a story earlier that I think it was during the second round of funding. I had all of our board of directors that represent you businesses actually writing letters to our elected officials. And one of our elected officials called me and said, "Okay, Terry, I got your message. How many board members do you have?" I said 35. So they are listening. They are responsive. So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you again, Jennings. And Paula, thank you. Next week, stay tuned. We have a representative from Arizona at Works on DES and what's happening on the unemployment front, which is with those additional dollars for unemployment are coming to an end July 31st. So with that being said, I'll be very curious. So get your questions answered from Arizona at Works and DES. And Paula, I hope that you'll join us next week with further updates.
I will.
You're always a fountain of information of what is happening. So thanks again for joining us, and thank you to our members who continually support us, and thank you to the Chandler Industrial Development Authority for continuing to provide support for businesses here in Chandler. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us.